Hello everyone! In this week's video, I'm going to be drawing 3 of my viewers' original characters. Many of you have been requesting I do another I Draw Your OC video, so I'm back with a new one. Usually in these videos, I only draw 1 OC, but this time I decided to draw 3 OCs, like in the I Draw Your Gotcha character videos. Also, if you want to know how you can submit your own original character, there's info in the description. All of these characters were randomly picked, so let's see who I'm drawing. The first character I'm drawing was created by NomNom38 on Twitter. The character's name is Syra Shinan. I don't know if I'm saying that right, I apologize. She is 15 years old, but she looks 18. Syra is very popular with the boys in her school. She is very pretty, elegant, and full of mystery. Nobody has ever seen her smile. So for this character, I'm starting by showing the line art. I decided to skip the sketching for this picture. For some of the pictures, I'm going to show the sketching, and then some of them, I'm going to show the line art. For this one, I'm showing the line art. I don't show the whole process for all of the pictures, or else the video would get really long, and it's already kind of long. So my concept for Syra, I keep forgetting how to say it. So my concept for Syra is that it's gonna be nighttime and she's kind of standing there mysteriously and her hair is blowing in the wind. And also I decided to use my more semi-realistic style. It's a style that I use more in my sketchbook than I do in my finished illustrations that I post on YouTube. It's just a little bit more realistic. The eyes are a little smaller. I define the nose a little bit more. I give them more lips. So after finishing the line art, I filled in the character with the colors, and I'm starting to work on the background a little bit. In the picture that was submitted to me, Syra has a bunch of mountains behind her, so I thought I would include mountains in this picture. At first, I was going to have this picture be in the daytime, so I had the mountains in the foreground be darker and then get lighter. But then, I don't know, the daytime lighting just didn't seem very interesting or mysterious, so I decided to make it nighttime, so I had to make the mountains in the back get darker instead of lighter, and I had to swap around the colors. But I feel like the nighttime lighting will be a lot more mysterious feeling. So I'm starting by adding a bit of a rim light all around the character. So I take white and then apply it all along her hair and to the edges of her face and clothing. I put it all on the right side because I was imagining the moon is kind of to the upper right. So I put all of the white lighting on the right side. I wanted Syra to look really mysterious and not have very much of an expression. I wanted it to look really blank, like we couldn't really tell what she was thinking. I wanted the lighting to be kind of strong and be casting a lot of different shadows on her face. This was kind of tricky and I wasn't totally sure how to go about it, especially when it came to the bridge of the nose area, because I felt like I was almost over defining the bridge of her nose. And yeah, her nose and bridge of the nose area gave me a lot of trouble. But it was really fun experimenting with this lighting. I had a lot of fun doing the shading around her eyes, like adding the shading underneath her eye and around the eyelid. That was really fun. I often don't define the planes of the face a ton in my more stylized style, so it was a lot of fun thinking about the different planes of the face. I'm also going back in and adding some darker shadows to kind of define the shape of her face a little bit more. So I put some around her nose and her cheek and the eyelid, and yeah, just trying to make the planes of her face more noticeable. I also use a lot of blue in her shading because it is nighttime, so we get a lot of dark bluey shading to make it feel really cool. And this is where I decided to kind of get rid of the bridge of the nose at the upper part and kind of make it go down into the cheek. I felt like this looked a little bit better and didn't over define the bridge of her nose, so I hope it looks okay. Next, I'm starting to work on her eyes, and I had so much fun working on her eyes. I was really trying to think of the form of the eye as like a ball kind of shape, so I was adding a lot of different shading all around the eye and also adding highlight to where the light from the moon would be hitting her eye, and I tried to give the iris a little bit of detail to make it look kind of more realistic. It's definitely still very stylized and anime-esque, but it's slightly more realistic than my usual style. Next, I'm going to add her makeup. In the picture that was sent to me, she had really dark lips, so I make her look like a clown. No, not really. I put a bunch of red and then I erase the red where I don't want it. I find this easier because I can kind of shape the lips how I want by erasing the color where I don't want it. It was kind of fun giving her the makeup. I never really super defined my character's lips. I also decided to give her a little bit of blushing on her cheeks and nose, and also a little bit on her ears. For the shading on her shirt, I was really trying to think of how the light would be hitting it and how it'd be kind of going across the plane of her chest. So I made the tie kind of cast a little bit of a shadow on it. I also used a darker blue color to add shading for the wrinkles and such. And then I used the blending tool to blend out the color a little bit. Lastly, I'm shading her hair. I decided to use my old hair shading style, and I made a bunch of tiny strokes for where I wanted the highlight to be. My old hair shading style is a bit more realistic, so I thought I would use it here. Lastly, I shade the mountains in the background, and this was so much fun. I loved shading the mountains. I felt like I was channeling my inner Bob Ross. And as I was shading these mountains, I was really trying to think of the different videos I had seen and how he shaded mountains. But yeah, it was a lot of fun. And for the sky background, I decided to use one from the Clip Studio asset library. I didn't really feel like drawing one because I was starting to get lazy. So here's the finished picture of Sarah. Thank you so much to NomNom38 for submitting her. I had so much fun drawing her. So now we'll move on to the next character. But before we do, it's time for a mini review. This is a mini review, but this tablet is huge. This is the Gaomon PD2200. Gaomon did send me this tablet to review, but all thoughts and opinions are my own. Like I said, this tablet is huge. It has a 21.5-inch HD screen. This tablet comes with a stand, and the stand comes installed on the tablet. This made me really happy. Most of the time I have to put on the stand myself, so I was really happy that it came installed. On this tablet, we can see it has these touch keys. On the right, we have the power, menu, plus, minus, and auto. On the left, we have touch keys that function based on the shortcuts in Photoshop by default, but you can customize them to whatever you want. With the tablet, we get things like the power cords, user manual, glove, and pen stand with extra nibs. Speaking of the pen, it has 8,192 levels of pressure sensitivity, so the pen will respond very well to changes in pen pressure. It is battery free and does not need to be charged. It also supports 60 degrees of tilt function. Setting up this tablet was a piece of cake. I had it set up in under 30 minutes and it worked perfectly right away. There are two things I want to note on. While drawing, I noticed that when I scroll around quickly on my canvas, I can kind of see a fade of whatever is on my canvas moving around. This can be a little jarring at times. I've had a different tablet do this. With this tablet, it isn't as strong as with the previous one I tried, but it is kind of noticeable, especially if I have my liner on my screen and then I scroll, it kind of makes a big blur all over the screen. The second thing I want to mention is that the drivers stop responding for me sometimes. Like when I leave my desk and my computer goes into sleep mode and then I come back later, the pressure sensitivity won't work sometimes. It's easy to fix if it stops working, and it doesn't do it every time, just ever so often. Drawing on this tablet feels really nice. The screen is fully laminated and has a protective film on it. The screen doesn't feel glassy. It has a very nice texture to it that my hand can easily slide around on while I'm drawing. I use this tablet for all of the art in this video. It feels really accurate, responds really well to changes in pen pressure, and I really enjoyed working on it. So if you're looking for a tablet with a large screen, consider getting the Gaomon PD2200. It gets 5 stars from me. Anyways, now back to the video. This character is by Eliza123440 on Instagram. The character's name is Skyler. They are 16 years old. They like reading, drawing, and singing. They are quiet, shy, sweet, and friendly. So let's start drawing Skyler. So for Skyler, I am starting by showing my cleanup sketch. My concept for Skyler is that she is singing, and that's about it. I decided to draw her singing because I thought it'd be kind of fun, and when I was trying to think of a pose for her, I was having a really hard time thinking of something to make her do, but then I kind of just had this flash of her singing in my mind, so I decided to go with that. And in my mind, the pose she was in, she kind of looks like she's leaning forward, and then we're kind of down below and the camera's kind of below her. I always have a really hard time with this angle, and my characters often look kind of funny at this angle. So I was trying really hard to make Skyler look nice and not weird. I'm pleased with how the body turned out. It looks like we're viewing it from that lower angle. And like I mentioned, I find this kind of tricky sometimes. So I was happy it turned out pretty okay. For the background, I decided to paint a sky background. At first I was thinking maybe I'd do a sunset because the characters' colors are really sunsetty. They have pinks and oranges. But then I decided to make the background be blue with white fluffy clouds, and I thought it'd feel really happy. I had a lot of fun painting the clouds. It was really fun. The lighting's coming from up and to the left, and I'm starting by shading Skyler's skin. And I don't like how this first thing of shading turned out. I don't know, I was adding my cell shading and then the softer shading on her skin, and there's just something that felt really off about it and that I didn't like, but I couldn't quite put my finger on it. So I decided to move on to the clothing and just kind of kept coloring the picture and decided to come back to the skin later. So for her clothing, I decided to add a pretty dramatic shadow underneath her chest because the light is coming from above. So her chest is casting a shadow on the other parts of her shirt. And then I'm also adding all of the shading for the wrinkles all over her shirt. I apply a darker pink and then blend it out with the blending tool. I always really love getting to shade clothing. It's one of my favorite things to do. Also, I decided to add a bounce light of blue on her chest. I felt like her chest looked like it was going into her sweater a little bit too much and like it was too much like one thing. So by adding that little bit of bounce light, it makes her chest look more like it's on a different plane, I guess, and like it isn't all just one shape. And next for the shirt, I'm adding where I want all the highlights to be. I made them super strong at first and blended them all out. And then I lower the opacity to make them not this strong. I kind of wanted to have a slight painterly feel with her sweater. And I really like how it turned out. I'm really happy with the sweater. And next I'm moving on to her hair. And her hair took me quite a while to color just because there is so much of it. I started by adding the band of highlight along her hair. I wanted her hair to look really shiny. I use a lot of darker orange streaks to add the shading to her hair. I add a bunch of tapering lines and then I use my eraser to make the tapering lines kind of fade a little. Also, I decided to add a blue highlight on the lower part of her hair to make it feel a little cooler and like it wasn't a highlight coming from the sun and that it was a highlight coming more from the bounce light. So I added some more bluey highlights in the area that wouldn't be getting hit by the sun and then more yellowy highlights in the area that would be getting hit by the sun. So now I'm finally going back and adding shading to her skin. And I feel like where I went wrong the first time is that I was making all of the shading a little bit too soft. And so this time I decided to try to make more of the shading a little harsher because it kind of felt like all of the shadows were just kind of fading into one thing and like her face was all just kind of one thing, if that makes sense. Now I'm moving on to coloring her eyes. Her eyes are pink, so those were kind of fun to shade. I also decided to add a bluey highlight in the top of her eye. I saw the artist, I don't know how to say their name, someone told me their name, but I'll just put their channel name on screen. And they put bluey highlights in the characters' eyes, and I thought this looked really cool, so I thought I'd try that out here. And yeah, I thought it looked really neat. Now I'm kind of just playing around with the shadows a little bit more and trying to make them feel a little bit more dramatic. I also add a bunch of light rays coming from the sky. And lastly, I decided to add I used a tree, but I wanted it to look like a bush. So I put a tree down in the corner and kind of made it look like it was a bush. And then I also added a tree in the upper right, just because things felt a little bit empty and I wanted to ground her a little bit more. So here's my finished picture of Skyler. I had so much fun with this picture and the coloring and the background. Thank you so much to Eliza123440 for submitting your character. And the last character I'm drawing was created by Rain. Their name is Lulu and they are 18 years old. Lulu is shy. She is also very caring, but she looks cold. She loves cute things, anime, and the color red. So out of all the characters, Lulu kind of gave me the most trouble, and I think that's because of her pose. I wanted her posture to feel really closed off and shy and kind of cold, like she wasn't open to us. So I have her head kind of tilting downwards, and she has her one arm grabbing her other arm. I was also trying to make it feel not stiff and kind of fluid. I was trying my best. Her eyes are really interesting. One eye has a thunderbolt and one eye has an X in it. I was kind of nervous about when I was going to have to color the eyes because I wasn't totally sure how I was going to do it. Right now I'm doing my cleanup sketch of my rough sketch, so I'm kind of trying to define the shapes a little bit more and kind of make them less wonky and fix them up a bit. Recently I've been trying to trust myself a little bit more with my art. And what I mean by that is that I've been trying to use the 3D models less in Clip Studio. I often use the 3D models and pose them to make a reference for myself. And I also often look up references online. And I'm not saying it's bad to use references. I still use them. But I'm also trying to let myself trust my own instincts a little bit more and kind of stylize things and feel free to kind of push things a little bit stylistically, because I feel like when I look at references and stuff, I kind of stiffen up and I try to make it a little bit like the reference. I notice with people's art, they'll kind of really stylize things and it wouldn't really make much sense in real life, but because they're stylizing it, you can really feel the motion or like the feeling of what they're trying to do. I don't know. I feel like I'm just rambling at this point. But basically, I'm trying to trust myself a little bit more and my understanding of things instead of always making references for myself or looking up references, especially using the Clip Studio 3D models as references because they're automatically kind of stiff. So looking at them is probably making my art more stiff, so I'm trying to use them less. So after doing my rough sketch, I was going to start doing my line art, but before I moved on to that, I decided I wanted the character to be tilted. I thought it'd make things a little bit more interesting, and I wanted to add a brick background, but I felt like the brick background would have felt really linear if I had kept everything like straight up. So I decided to slightly tilt everything to make things feel a little bit more dynamic. So after that, I did my line art and base coloring, and now I am moving on to the shading. And I had no clue what I wanted to do for the shading at first. I'm like, what am I gonna do with this? She's just standing by a brick background. But then I thought maybe it'd be cool to have light like shining in from somewhere, like there's other things blocking the light and then there's just this ray of light coming in, and maybe it's kind of like a sunset lighting, so it's got a lot of oranges and yellows and reds. I was kind of just playing around with this idea at this point, but I started to like it, so I decided to go with it. So as you saw, I put that big thing of light and then I kind of just erased it where I didn't want it to be. I was really trying to think about how it was hitting the character and where the light would be hitting. It was kind of tricky and it took me a little while, but I'm pleased with the result. Now I'm starting to add more shading to her neck and stuff. I actually redo the shadow in a little bit for some reason. I don't remember why, but I'm using a lot of different purpley and pinky colors for the shading. So now I'm moving on to coloring her shirt. Nothing super exciting here, just kind of my usual shirt coloring process, and I was just trying to think about how all the different lighting was working. Right here, I was just kind of roughing in the shadows. I go back in later and kind of clean them up a little bit more. Lulu is really cute. My sister really liked her. Oh, and I'm sorry I accidentally made Lulu's hair a little bit too long. It was kind of supposed to stop around her hips, but for some reason I made it go even longer. So I apologize for that I made her hair too long. So here's where I'm going back in and cleaning up my wrinkles a little bit more and defining them and darkening the shadows. There was a lot of back and forth in this picture of going back to areas and darkening shadows and adding light to things. But it was a lot of fun playing with this lighting situation and all the different colors. Oh, I'm really happy with how her eyes turned out. Like I mentioned, I wasn't totally sure how I was going to shade them because they're really different. They have the shapes for the pupils. But I basically just applied a bunch of shadow to them and then highlights in the bottom areas. And then I added that lighter blue shadow like I did with the last character. And then gave it little tiny white highlights and also a roundish highlight in the bottom of the eye. And I'm really happy with how her eyes turned out. They kind of look like glass domes. And I don't know, they just look really cool, I think. And lastly, I am shading her hair. Her hair, like with the last character, took me quite a while to shade because there is a lot of hair. I really liked adding the band of highlight in her hair. I used a really strong yellowy orangey color and then made it kind of fade to a more pinky red color. And yeah, that was a lot of fun adding that band of highlight. I also try to add more highlights all over her hair where the light is hitting the different parts of her hair. I also add a little bit of pink bounce light on the left side of her just to make things a little bit more interesting. I'm going to add a cast shadow of Lulu. So to do this, I select the outline of Lulu and then fill in the outline with a dark purple and then move it over and then blur it out. And then I get a cast shadow of her. I also add some darker lighting around the edges and play around with my levels and values a little bit. Oh, I also decided to add little particles of like dust kind of floating in the air. I thought maybe it'd help give things a little bit more emotion and feel a little bit more lively. So here's the finished picture of Lulu. I had so much fun playing around with this lighting situation. Thank you so much to Rain for submitting your character. I had a lot of fun working on this picture. And here are the other characters I drew. Thank you so much to everyone who submitted their characters. There were so many entries. Anyways, that is all for this video. Thank you all so much for watching, and I'll see you all next week in my next video. Bye!